Okay, hello. Good morning. My name's Russell Buckley. I'm from AdMob, which is the world's largest mobile advertising network. And I'm here today to talk to you about how you can make money, essentially, from mobile advertising. So I'll just get stuck in. So what we're going to be talking about today is a little agenda here. Is first of all, if you've got mobile assets, and by that I mean mobile websites, whether you're an independent publisher, off-portal, or whether you're a mobile operator, whether you're an application developer on an independent basis. Obviously, that's a highly topical area and one which we're growing into quite rapidly at the moment. Or indeed, if you're interested in branded applications, increasingly we're seeing big brands starting to launch iPhone applications in particular. We'll be covering that as well. And in between that, we'll be talking about the role of advertising as far as developers and publishers are concerned, and also if you're a potential advertiser as well. So this might be an example of a mobile website with an ad on it, and that would be an example of an application which, as I say, is increasingly important with a mobile ad in it as well. So I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about AdMob, just to put things into context. We're about 3.5 years old, and during that time we're growing pretty rapidly. In our first 6 months or so, we did about 70 million ads worldwide, which we thought was fantastic for a little three-man startup at that point. But in our second 6 months, we actually did 1 billion. Our third 6 months, we did 5 billion, and today we do about 10 billion ads every month, or since we started, about 110 billion. So if any of you came here expecting that mobile's a tiny little business, I'm here to tell you that it's not, from personal experience. We serve ads in over 200 countries, and the way we do that is our modus operandi, is we go out and we find people with mobile websites initially, and increasingly, as I say, applications, and say, would you like to work with us? We'll serve ads on your site, and every time somebody sees an ad or clicks on an ad, and depending on the model, we'll give you some money, we'll share revenue with you. They often say yes, and that's how we were able to build up such a huge portfolio of advertising globally from pretty much day one. Wherever there are mobile telephones or mobile operators, we are serving ads on a daily basis, and by the time I've finished this short presentation, we'll have served an ad at least in every country in the world that you can think of. I'll go on to how that breaks down a little bit in a few minutes and share some statistics with you. We basically have a number of different products. We have text links, which are a bit like Google AdWords, where we started off with. We then moved into graphical banners, again, very similar to the internet. And where it's getting more interesting and where it's sort of diverting away from the PC-based web is on the iPhone, and we'll talk about that a bit later. We also have an analytics product, which is a free product, whether or not you work with us, which helps you either as a publisher to work out where people are coming into your site, where they're leaving it, how long they're dwelling there, and all the other rich information which we've come to expect from the internet on the PC, which really didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago, and so we saw the need for that and provided it to the marketplace for free. But from an advertising point of view, it allows advertisers to work out if their ads worked or not, which is always quite important. Advertising, particularly on the mobile, is highly accountable, and therefore people need to know if it worked, and that's what analytics does. So far, we've had over 7,000 publishers join us, and 2,500 iPhone and increasingly Android developers working with us. So that makes us easily the world's biggest advertising platform, and we've got offices in various countries, as you can see. I think it's important to say that although we're a Silicon Valley-based startup, our heritage comes as much from Europe as it does from the US, in the sense that when Omar Hamoui, our founder, started the company, I was actually the first person he employed, and I was based in Munich in Germany. So a lot of our early growth came from actually Europe itself rather than from the States. These are some of our publishers. Some of their names will be familiar to you, whether that be AccuWeather, MapQuest, TV Guide, MySpace, etc. all big brands at the top of the screen. At the bottom of the screen, maybe if you're not a very mobile, not a mobile specialist, we're so familiar with these, but these are the sort of social networking sites which specialize in mobile. Their heritage started in mobile, not the PC, and they've got huge amounts of traffic. I mean, Pepperonity is an example, one of our early champions who joined us very early on. They have about 600 million page views a month all over the world, just on mobile. They don't really do anything on the web at all. To compare that to, say, Facebook, which is obviously a lot more high profile and have got the incumbent PC users who they can switch over. Facebook today probably does about 1 billion page views a month. So Pepperonity are much lower profile in the world because nobody's actually noticed that mobile social networking is important, but they're still a big player. Incidentally, if anybody's got any questions, just put your hand up at any point and I'm happy to answer them. In terms of our advertising base, this might surprise a few people. When we started, very much we were about mobile content, so it was people like Jamba coming to us with their ringtone proposition or Gameloft with their games, and it was about changing the mobile phone, what had been a distribution channel, into a marketing channel, so you could then suddenly start selling mobile content, ringtones, etc., directly via the phone. People would click on it and it would download to their phone. So it was a marketing and distribution channel. But we very quickly moved out into big brands as well, and they're increasingly more important in our mix. And you can see some of the big names there, ranging from Adidas to Coke, right over to the other side in terms of the big internet brands like Google, Yahoo, etc., who are all using us to promote their products. I think the other thing which is a big milestone for us this year is we've had our first $1 million campaign, which is running in the States, $1.6 million with Jaguar and the Land Rover campaign. I think there's perception that mobile up to this point has been like a little amounts of money, little test amounts of money, and in fact now people are spending $1 million or more. At the recent Mobile Marketing Association's forum in Berlin a couple of months ago, we had 11 big world-class brands ranging from BMW, Lufthansa, Pepsi, Coke, etc., who were all presenting. And they were all talking about what they're doing in mobile, not what they plan to do in mobile, which is a big step forward. And Coke actually said that as far as Coca-Cola is concerned worldwide, mobile had moved from the test stage into the integration stage. So it's now a full part of their marketing mix. So that's pretty exciting to see. I think the other thing which was of note of that particular conference was that every one of those speakers stood up and said at some point, and here's our iPhone app. So again, that's a really big thing that 11 brands were all talking about iPhone already. If I haven't made it quite clear, that's what a couple of ads look like, a graphical banner and a text link. Text links are where we started and are still an incredibly important and effective means of advertising, as they still are on the web, but we've gone in new directions. I'm quite conscious, having sat at the back of the last presentation, you might not be able to see this very well, but you can go and browse it at your leisure. If you go to our website, admob.com/metrics, and we do this report every month. You can either subscribe to it or download it whenever you want, really. And what the metrics are about is when we first started at AdMob, we realized pretty early on that there was no real information about the marketplace as a whole. If you wanted to find out the biggest websites, it was easy to do that on the PC, but you couldn't do that on mobile. And so we started sharing data, and that became our metrics report, which we publish every month now. And that goes through everything from the biggest markets through to the types of handset people are using, what smartphones breakdowns are by market, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of information which I won't go through today. But I thought I would share with you some of the slides, and particularly where Eastern Europe comes into that in comparison to, say, Western Europe and a worldwide pattern. So this is worldwide. And the way we gather this information is it's where we serve our ads. So we serve over 10 billion ads every month. and we then record what type of handset people are seeing those on. And overwhelmingly, the most popular handset in the world now is the iPhone, or more accurate, actually, the Apple, because you have the two handsets, iPhone and iTouch, which people are using increasingly as a miniature PC at home over Wi-Fi to view the web and play with applications. If you think when we first started, only 3.5 years ago, the number, probably the top 10 would all be Nokia. So that's changed completely. Now, that isn't to say that worldwide Apple are dominant, but what I am saying is that people who use Apple phones tend to use them to much greater extent than anyone else. So they'll use the mobile web, they'll use applications, and in our network, that's what's being reflected here. So the people who are using the phones to the utmost are Apple, and that's the kind of proxy which we're talking about here. So probably bad news for Nokia, although in terms of brands, and particularly smartphones, they're still number 3. But I think they'd find that disappointing. How does that compare to Western Europe? Well, actually not very different, except that the iPhone and iTouch are number 1 and 2 again. And look at this, that isn't even a mobile phone, it's only PSP, which is suddenly coming into 3rd place in Western Europe, which is a big change. In the smartphone sector, again, you've got iPhone dominant, and that's, as I say, a big change in the last couple of years. So how does that compare to Eastern Europe? Well, the iPhone is still number 1 again, which might quite surprise you, considering that it's still relatively small over here. Why are you shaking your head, sir?
I'm not sure that it's really like that. I didn't know that you get the metrics from, but most of the handsets here are not at least not in Bulgaria.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. The reason why, and I tried to explain, is that what we're measuring is where we're serving ads. So what it's actually saying is that Apple users use the mobile web far more than anybody else. So it is surprising, but then if you take into account our methodology, and that's all we can share, it's our methodology. So what it says for the future is that Nokia better look out, because the people who have got iPhones are using them a lot more than any other handset. And again, in terms of the smartphones, again, the iPhone is dominant. So no surprises here that we're very excited about the iPhone. It's sort of transformed our business in many ways. So let's look at actual numbers for a second. As I say, we serve 10 billion ads a month at the top there. And this breaks down our top markets, the US, and this is about consumption, not necessarily where the publishers are based. So the US has always been very strong because there's more people using the mobile web there. The reason why that is because they've always had fixed rate data plans from pretty much day one, and therefore people aren't afraid to click on a mobile website. But there's some quite surprising stats here where India, Indonesia, Philippines, all emerging markets are all really important and all have billions of page views every month in the network. And that's because, again, mobile web is cheap to use out there, and people are using it instead of a PC, really, and therefore you would expect that kind of uptake. In terms of the regions, well, North America dominant. Eastern Europe, as you can see, is about 195 million page impressions a month in the Eastern European bloc. To us, that's quite small. It's less than 2% of our network. But that's partly because we've never really been here or tried to develop the marketplace. It just means that, for instance, if we sign up a publisher in Germany, they're going to have some traffic in Bulgaria, inevitably, and therefore we will get that traffic. So we don't have deals with operators or anything like that in this country. It's just a function of the way we work. But even though it's sort of quite small in relative terms to AdMob, nearly 200 million page views a month or 200 million opportunities to advertise every month to consumers is probably more than you thought might be. Certainly more than I thought when I looked at the stats in the first place. So why do we need a mobile strategy if you're a publisher? Hang on. Well, there's a temptation with a lot of web publishers. They say, okay, well, we've got a PC site over here, so let's just treat it in exactly the same way for our mobile site, and we'll serve the same ads, and we'll just do the same thing, and it's not very important anyway, is it? Well, it is a very, very different medium. It shares some commonality, but it's also very different, and it's different really on 4 criteria, one of which is measurement. The way you measure and record the analytics from mobile is completely different from the PC. The CTRs, the click-through rates, and the engagement rates with mobile is a lot higher. Therefore, it's worth spending a little bit more time. It's about 10 times higher in a mobile, generally speaking, than you would expect on average on a PC ad. The advertisers are pretty different still. As I showed you some of them earlier on. Some of them are the same, but we've got a lot of mobile content people. We don't do a lot of financial services, as an example, in mobile yet. So there are kind of big differences, and you need to treat it as a different way to maximize your profitability. But more importantly, the formats are very, very, very different. This keeps slipping forward for some reason. I just want to... This is an example of a very sophisticated advertiser in the UK. Spent a lot of money developing a product called Compare the Market, which is a very generic URL. So they came up with a very clever marketing campaign. You can just about see him here around the meerkats, and it was sort of like these little furry meerkats jumping up and down, saying "Compare the meerkats" is how they, and they spent a lot of money on TV and everything. Very sophisticated PC advertiser, but then they tried to go on the iPhone without changing it at all. There's a couple of things to notice. First of all, it's a mess. What are you meant to do? There's no clear call to action here at all. On a PC, that would be very understandable. It would be very clear. Do you go here to get a quote on your car, or here to get a quote on your house, as an example? But here, you just don't know. Secondly, a big thing to note here is this prime real estate of the screen. They built it in Flash on the PC, and Flash doesn't work on the mobile. Now, this week we announced, or Adobe announced, that it was going to work on some mobile phones, but the iPhone is excluded from that, so it would still be a waste of money. And what they actually have on the website is their little meerkats, which they spent millions of dollars creating that identity, and around the brand, they're all jumping up and down cutely in the middle here, but you can't see anything because it's built in Flash. So that gives you an example of why you shouldn't treat it as the same. This particular advertiser was even more unfortunate because they built their whole site in Flash, so you can see that there's absolutely nothing comes up. So somebody saw their ad, they clicked on it, they got there, they paid the money, wasted their money completely, waste of time. And it's also a bad consumer experience, so you have to treat them as different. It's not just about Flash, though, although that's the most obvious way to demonstrate it. It's about page loading time. People often download ads and landing pages over Wi-Fi, in which case it's pretty quick. But if they're not over Wi-Fi, if they're over an operator network, it's slower. They get bored. They click on an ad, and then they leave before they've seen the landing page. So again, it's a waste of time and money. And the call to action, which I showed you on the meerkats thing, just needs to be very, very clear. And obviously, those 2 examples, it's not. So very important to create a different mobile strategy. So let's just backtrack a bit and look at where we are in the market in the sort of historical sense of the word. In the beginning, like 2 or 3 years ago, we were in a different sort of marketplace. We were very operator-centric. So if you wanted to do anything in mobile, you really had to go and talk to an operator. They've obviously realized that that's not the best business model in the world, and a lot of them have pulled down their walled gardens, and there's off-portal, which has grown. And it's a different way of approaching the market. At the same time, our operator friends have invested in faster networks now, so that we can put some real content, not as fast as the PC and broadband yet, but it's getting there. We had very expensive data plans, so people wouldn't use the mobile web. They wouldn't download applications. It was too expensive. And we had phones which really were just about doing voice and SMS. So there wasn't very much opportunity for advertiser engagement. And what there was all about SMS. We've moved on somewhat. Operators have embraced openness again, and that's sort of the key buzzword in mobile now these days is open. We've got much higher speed networks and affordable data plans. People are no longer afraid to click on an ad or click on a landing page. And in fact, many instances they're using ads as discovery tools. They see something interesting, they click on it, they find out about it. It doesn't have to cost them any money. They know it's free, so it's very compelling. And that's enabled us to do much more about pull marketing, which is more effective and more acceptable to the consumer generally, because they can decide to look at it and engage with it or not as they feel like it. So I think we've now kind of reached the beginning of the next phase, and with the handsets, and it's sort of very, very exciting time to be involved in mobile. So I want to just quickly look, before we move on, about how a medium develops, because we're at that cusp in mobile where a lot of the early stuff we saw came directly from the PC. So we had the little text ads, we had the banners, and I'll show you how that's evolved in a minute. But let's just look at how a market develops. This is a very, very early ad from about 1890 in America, which was in a magazine, and it's a very basic ad, which the heritage, if you like, where it came from was the old pamphlets which came before newspapers. And the typeface is sort of boring, black and white. It's actually an ad for a hangover, but they couldn't say hangover those days because it wasn't kind of politically correct. And it was very little to engage you. But you fast forward to today and how that's evolved in print, and you can see that they're using kind of humor, they're using color, they're not using copy in quite the same way, and they're talking about hangovers, so completely different, and that's how a market tends to evolve. This is one of the first ads which was ever run actually the first ad ever run on TV in the world, and it was run in the early 30s for a watch company called Boulevard, and it was a 20-second ad, and the actual footage of the film has been lost completely to time, but it's very easy to recreate today, because what happened is this image came on screen, and America runs on Boulevard time. And it was back to the ball game. So that's how the very first ad worked. So you can see that if you could take that very, very early instance of advertising and how it then evolved into the 30-second commercials, which we see today, it's completely different, and you can see the evolution. And we're at that stage in mobile too. I think the second bit was Mr. Boulevard probably said very shortly afterward, did that actually work? Which was a question they're still trying to answer in advertising. Fortunately, we don't have to answer it in mobile because it's very clear whether mobile advertising works or not. Just continue the theme, out of interest, this is a very early version of Twitter I found also from the 1930s, where it's a coin-operated machine where you can leave small 160-character messages for people in the vicinity. Maybe the coin operation bit will give Twitter some ideas about a business model. Obviously, that one failed. So that's how different media have developed. And let's just look at how mobile's developed in the last only 3.5 years. This was an example here of probably our very first ad, or one of our very first ads 3.5 years ago. Let's have a look at the video, please, for the ads which we're now doing on the iPhone. This is a little montage of ads which show how people interact now on the iPhone with advertising. So here they've seen an ad for a very bad movie, as it happens. They've clicked on the ad. They're going to see a little preview. Seamlessly transposes itself into YouTube, and they can see the ad. This is an example of an application. So they're going to go to Google Earth. They'll see an ad. In this case, it's a location-based ad for Best Buy. Where's my nearest Best Buy? Here. And it, again, transposes quite quickly and shows them exactly where the nearest ad is. App Store, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. They've seen an ad for an app. They can go straight to the App Store in a seamless manner, That sounds interesting. Let's buy it. Let's get it. Audio. This is a big thing for the music industry. You can go and listen to a track, and later on we'll see how you can perhaps buy it through iTunes. The web, pretty obvious. Let's go to their website. And they can then look at a video or something and do a test drive. iTunes is a big boon for the music industry. You can go and listen to a track and download it straight to your iPhone. Video. For some reason, we used 2 really bad movies in this little video. And this is probably the most important one for, in terms of the evolution, is click to call. You can't do this in a PC. Well, you could over Skype or something, but it's not going to be the same thing. It's seamless. So that's how it's evolved. You can see in the same way as TV, the same way as print's evolved. This is how the mobiles evolved, and it's still evolving. So let's talk a bit about applications. We've talked a bit about how the mobile web works and how that's evolved. I'll just introduce this with a short video for Reebok. If we can show the video, please. So it's very difficult to think back 2 or 3 years, but the idea of being able to design your own sneaker on a phone in such a seamless way and order it is pretty amazing. And more brands, more developers are obviously jumping on that bandwagon. Apple just announced last week that they've sold their 2 billionth, or they've had 2 billion applications downloaded so far. The first billion took them about 18 months. The second billion took them 5 months. So it's still growing. There's about 65,000 applications, and many of them make money through advertising. Many of them use advertising to promote themselves, and that's what we're really going to talk about the last 10 minutes or so. So if you're an independent developer, how would you start making money from the App Store? Well, first of all, I think the clever ones have worked out that there's a difference between free and premium. So the key thing is to, if you really want to maximize your profit, is you launch a free version, which gets people used to it, maximizes the downloads, and is funded entirely by advertising. And once you've got a bunch of people using it, you can then start trying to get them to upgrade to a premium product on a paid-for basis. That still can contain advertising if you want. That's really down to you as an application developer. And once you've got those two in place, you can then start playing the games you need to do in order to maximize your revenue. The first thing you need to do, and the very, very important thing, is to get featured in the Apple listings. So that's either the top 100 overall applications or the top 20 in your category. And the trick is to get into that top 20 or top 100, because then that just encourages downloads in volumes which you wouldn't believe. A top 10 or top 5 application, according to Flurry, the analytics people, gets about 50,000 downloads a day, which is a lot of downloads, a lot of opportunities to advertise, and a lot of opportunities to make money. So how do you do that? We'll come on to getting them into the top 10 or the top 20 or top 100 in a minute through use of advertising. The second thing you do is you create some in-house ads in your free application to encourage people to upgrade to the premium one, paid for, and you cross-sell in any other applications you do. If you work with AdMob, we have a free tool to enable you to run house ads in your thing, just as an aside. The other things to look out for are a viral spread, anything you can do to encourage viral. I can't go into a huge amount of detail on all this at the moment because I'm going to be pushed for time. The timing of the launch is really important. Midweek is much better than the weekend because there's less competition for new applications then. And PR is really important as well, both to the trade press and the specialist review sites which exist for Apple users, but also anybody who's might be interested in the mainstream press because they cover your area. As an example, I'm just going to go on to show you a decorating app. So the decorating press would certainly be interested in this, although it doesn't sound very logical. So this is a case study which was for a company called Sherwin-Williams, and it would apply equally for if you're an independent developer or if you're a brand with an application to promote and want to get it into that top 20. Sherwin-Williams are rather unlikely app developers. It's a big brand in the United States, but it's basically a paint DIY product. So you go to your do-it-yourself store, you get a can of paint, come home and paint your bathroom or whatever. That's the people. So how did they use an app, and why was it so successful? Well, they developed an application called Color Snap, which allows you to take a photograph with your iPhone of a color which you like. Maybe it would be the orange, which of our badges here. And it would then take you to the nearest color which they had available in their range. It would then tell you, in this case, it would be bright orange or virulent yellow yellow in this case of the taxi cab. And then it would match it and also tell you where your nearest store was. In terms of how they promoted that, they ran some ads, as you can see there, which took them straight to the App Store, which took them straight to the free download. So it's a very easy, integrated way of promoting within the iPhone ecosystem. So how did they do that? They wanted to get in the top 20, as I said. That's really important. So they spent a very relatively small amount of money for them, of $15,000 in a couple of days. It was what we call a burst campaign, so it wasn't over a long time. The objective was purely to catapult it straight up into the top 20. That got them 11.9 million page impressions, which is pretty impressive, and 1% click-through with 129,000 clicks. What that did was it increased their downloads by 500%, catapulted them into number 18 slot, and then they can stop advertising because they're there. And the organic downloads you'll deliver from being in the top 20 is going to be far more than advertising will be able to deliver you. So that's what happened. You can see the 4th of August, the advertising clicked in. Immediately you got a huge increase, nearly 400%, which got them into their coveted top spot. But what happened next is equally interesting, because that's where the advertising was, and you can see that after the advertising stopped, they're still in the top 20 because the organic downloads that they're generating from being in the top 20 slot guaranteed them that place, and they're far higher at the end of that little burst of advertising than they were at the beginning. And you can see that they carried on doing that. The other thing I want to mention is that when you're running that kind of campaign, there's lots of different ways of promoting that. So you've got on the left there, you've got lots of different ways of creating the copy, the creative execution, saying the same thing, etc. And then you can see the results that each creative execution got. So you then focus on probably the one on the top right-hand corner, Ask Shirley Williams Free app, with the 1.79 CTR click-through rate, because that was one which worked. So you'd actually then go back and optimize and reinvest your money in that application, in that creative, because that was going to work better than anybody else. So, summary, how does that all fit together? Well, the two things I really want to leave with you are that, first of all, that mobile is a really unique channel. It's not just a small PC. You have to treat it as a different thing and monetize in a different way. I think the second thing about it is that it is much bigger volumes than most people think when they first look at it. We are talking about billions of ads every month, and even hundreds of millions in Eastern Europe already. And the other thing is that there's definitely money to be had here, whether you're an advertiser and want to engage with consumers, whether you're a publisher who just wants to make money, whether you're a mobile operator, again, who wants to monetize their portal, or whether you're an apps developer. There's a role there for both advertising to make you money and also to catapult you up into the charts and make you even more money. Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions or... No? Okay. Oh, a couple of questions here.
I have one question in the terms of local Bulgarian conditions, because we know that in the United States the Apple iStore is very popular.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure, but I think that the Apple, we don't, in Bulgaria, have no representative. I don't have the right to download any apps from the Apple Store. I have to have registration for Romania, but not from Bulgaria.
Sure.
And secondary, because it depends, I think there is 23 different iStores right now. It depends who will be the best ones, and they will stay. But
yeah.
But what do you think if the native apps will continue to be much more usable than the normal web apps? That means if I use only the internet, I can bookmark, applications that they're from the normal web. Because sometimes the limitations of Apple Store, you have to be listed only in the first 20 relevant, apps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And your provision about the markets like in Bulgaria or Balkans and stuff like that.
Yeah, if I answer the second one first, actually, that I think it's quite interesting the whole apps market, because the received wisdom in the mobile industry before Apple did what they did was that people don't download apps. I argued for quite a long time that people would download apps if it was easy for them to do it, and if they understood what the app did in the first place. And I think what Apple have done is proven that point. That they've made it very, very easy for people who are kind of lazy. I think the other thing which is really important is that people like to own stuff, and it's like if I give you the rights to listen to this music, or I sell you the track. Actually, selling you the track because you're kind of used to owning it is probably more attractive. And the whole point about apps is that it's yours, and you've downloaded it and you can play with it, whether you pay for it or whether it's free. Is a sense of ownership. So I don't actually see apps going away very quickly because of that ownership angle and because people like them. I think what might happen, there might be an interim stage at some point, maybe 2 or 3 years, where essentially an app will just become a bookmark or an interface, as you suggest, to get through to all the work is being done on the web and in the cloud, as it were. But I think we're a bit away from that at the moment. And the fact is that apps can do things today which you can't really do at the same speeds on the web, particularly over an operator network. So I don't see that happening. I think apps are a phenomenon here to stay, and I think they're much likely to stay longer than everybody thinks. As far as the situation with the apps in Bulgaria, I really don't know, I'm afraid. I mean, I think you'd have to ask Apple what their plans are. I mean, they are rolling out local versions of stores, and obviously when an iPhone goes on sale officially, that's when you tend to see the app stores being launched in a local language, or at least available locally. But it's really something for Apple, and they don't really like to talk about things. So there's another question right there.
I have a question. I work for a publisher. It's called Economedia, and we have mobile versions of all our websites.
Yeah.
And we're trying to sell advertisement there. And when seeing all the major brands like Nike, Adidas, General Motors, and everything, it looks kind of easy. But if you try to go back in time and imagine like my question is, what are the first first advertisers that you convinced to use your mobile ad network, and how did you convince them? Because in Bulgaria it's very hard even to get a budget for online campaign compared to TV or print or whatever. And now even that we're selling pretty well online advertisement in various forms, how do you split another fork for mobile marketing, and how do you persuade like publishers that this is also a part of their media mix?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the kind of short answer, I guess, is that the number one thing which an advertiser is really interested in is what they call reach, or how many people they can get to via the medium. So if you as a publisher go and say, well, I've got 20,000 pages a month or something, they'll say, well, come back to us when you've got 2 million or whatever the figure they've got in their mind. And that's really where company like AdMob come in, where we're aggregating lots of publishers together to be able to go and talk to advertisers on that basis, that we have got all these millions and millions or billions of page views throughout the world. And so a lot of mainstream publishers today, they work with AdMob as an example in two ways. First of all, they try and sell their ads themselves through their own sales force, and that's fine, they can do that. And anything they don't sell, they give to us to sell, and we normally can sell it. So that's the short answer. But the key thing with advertisers is, first of all, reach. It's still a mass market. They want to reach a lot of people, so you've got to be able to show them that. And then it's just a question of educating the market, and it obviously takes time. It took us probably 18 months to educate brands. Our very early publishers, our very early advertisers were all, ringtones, content providers, etc. Okay, no more questions? Good. Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed that. I hope you did too.